Hey guys, it's Lucian, and today I am going to be talking about 10 books and authors that I recommend you pick up or start reading from this month, which is Asian Pacific Islander American Heritage Month, and also the Asian Readathon. So I have participated in the Asian Readathon 4 times now. I think this is my 4th time. I've participated every year. It's been held by Cindy from With Cindy. And I have 10 books and authors that I want to recommend to you all today that you pick up this month for the Heritage Month that's happening and also for the Readathon. So these are in no particular order, but I'm going to start with one of my favorite authors of all time, Tahereh Mafi, and I have 5 books to talk about. I'm not going to talk about every single author's books, but I'm going to mention the main few. So obviously we have the Shatter Me series by Tahereh Mafi, which follows a girl named Juliet who has the ability to kill with her touch, and one day she's given the decision to either get out of prison and work for the government or stand up and rebel. And there's 6 books in the series, 7 technically, and then some novellas. And yeah, it's one of my favorite series of all time. My favorite book in the series, if you're wondering, is the second book, Unravel Me, but they're all pretty great. And I'd really recommend them. They're great fast reads, and yeah, it's just a really fun time. Then we have Tahereh Mafi's 2 contemporary books, A Very Large Expanse of Sea and An Emotion of Great Delight. These are they're kind of like companions, but they're not their stories are not really related, but Tahereh Mafi has kind of called them companions before. I love both of these books. I gave them both 5 out of 5 stars when I read them. I reread A Very Large Expanse of Sea every year. I'm going to reread it for the 5th time this year, and I'm probably going to do the same with An Emotion of Great Delight. It'll be my 3rd time reading it. But A Very Large Expanse of Sea takes place in 2002, so it's a year after 9/11, and we follow a Muslim teenager named Shireen who moves to a new school, and she's kind of dealing with all the bullying that's going on because of her appearance, because she wears hijab, and she ends up meeting a boy named Ocean who kind of helps her break down her walls a little bit. So that's this book. I love it. It's one of my favorite books of all time, possibly my favorite contemporary book of all time. I just love it so much. And then we have An Emotion of Great Delight, which takes place in 2003, in the end of 2003, after the US has declared war in Iraq, and we follow a main character named Shadi, whose world is kind of crumbling down around her. She lost a friend, lost a friendship, her father is ill, her mother is in a really, really dark place, and she's just really sad all the time. And this book takes place in a couple of days, and it kind of just follows her as she tries to break out of that, and search for joy once more. So again, love this one. I don't love it as much as A Very Large Expanse of Sea, but I still give it 5 stars, and I still really love it. Then I have some Persian fantasy books that she wrote. So she did also have Furthermore, which is another middle grade novel, but the one that I want to specifically recommend for this month is Whichwood. Furthermore does also include some Islamic and Persian influences, but this one is definitely has more of it, as I'm sure you can tell from the cover. The main character is a hijabi, and her name is Layli, and she lives in a town called Whichwood, and her job is basically to scrub the souls of the dead people to help them move on peacefully. And she's been doing this for a while, and it's really taxing, and it's taking a toll on her and her body. And it's a very metaphorical, magical, middle grade novel. The 2 characters from Furthermore end up showing up in this book, and there's another character named Benjamin, and it's just really magical and whimsical. I love these books so much. I love the way that Tahereh Mafi wrote these books, and this is definitely one of my favorite of hers. I think it's just so magical, and yeah, I really love it, and the cover's great. And the atmosphere is great. It's all wintry and fun, and yeah, I absolutely loved this one, and I really loved the Persian kind of mythology that is included in the story as well. Same with Tahereh Mafi's most recent release, which is This Woven Kingdom. This is definitely one of my favorite of her books. I give it 5 out of 5 stars. This follows 2 main characters. One of them is Alize, who is the long-lost heir to a Jinn kingdom, and she is disguising herself as a servant in this mansion because she knows that her power is very dangerous. And then we have another main character named Kamran, who is the crown prince to this empire, and his grandfather is kind of trying to prep him for the throne and all this stuff. There's a lot of political intrigue. I have an entire reading blog / review where I talk about this book, and I loved it. It's one of my favorites, and yeah, it's great, and it's really long, and it's like a nice fantasy book, and there's a lot of Persian influence in the story. It's great. Definitely recommend. Next, we have Marie Lu, and I have 3 books, or wait, how many do I have? 4 books that I want to recommend from her backlist today. One of them is Warcross, which I'm probably going to end up rereading this month, actually, and this follows a main character named Amika Chen, who is like a hacker, and she lives in this kind of like near future where this game called Warcross has taken the world by storm. It was developed by this kind of wunderkind named Hideo Tanaka, and she ends up accidentally hacking into the like championship games, and she thinks she's going to be arrested for her crimes or something. But when Hideo calls her, he's actually inviting her to come to Tokyo to play in the Warcross games, and she accepts, and it kind of goes from there. There's a lot of political intrigue. Well, like, not really, but like there's like an underworld, like it's kind of dark world that's kind of has its own politics and stuff. And it's really cool. I love the atmosphere. I love the setting. Marie Lu's books are so good. This one's so fast-paced, and I don't even like video games, and I was so addicted to this book. So if that sounds appealing to you, I definitely recommend it. It's a really fun, like, kind of spring read, so definitely pick this one up, and its sequel, Wildcard. Then I actually have the finale in the series. It's just my favorite one in the series, but obviously you'd start with the first one. I have The Midnight Star by Marie Lu, which is the 3rd and final book in the Young Elite series, which follows a girl named Adelina, who lives in this kind of like warped version of Venice. It's like this fantasy version, and she and a few other people who survived this fever are now like marked, and they have special abilities, and Adelina can create shadows, and she kind of becomes embroiled in some stuff. I don't want to spoil it because I kind of went into that book very blind, so I think it's a great way to go into the story. And oh my god, like the first book I liked, the second book was really, really good, but The Midnight Star I loved. Like, I'm obsessed with this book. Every time I think about it, I think of like all these different scenes. It's so addicting. Oh my god, this series shook me to my core. Then I have The Kingdom Back, which is actually her first standalone novel. And this is a historical fiction novel that follows the sister of Mozart and about how she kind of wants to make a name for herself and be remembered in the world. And so she ends up making a deal with this princeling from this mythical kingdom that she and her brother dreamed up to be remembered forever, and she has to perform these tasks for him, and they kind of get darker and darker and darker as the story progresses. It's really good. I love historical fiction, and Marie Lu did not disappoint. It's a historical fiction fantasy, so it still has the sci-fi fantasy elements that she loves to write about in her other books, and it's just really great. The characters are amazing. The writing is some of like my favorite, and it's just really magical and fun, so definitely would recommend this one. And then the last one from Marie Lu that I'm going to recommend today is Skyhunter. This is her newest or most recent series. This book follows a girl named Talon, who is a part of this elite band of warriors who are fighting for the last free nation in this world that has been taken over by something called the Carenza Federation, and Talon is, you know, in like, she's one of these, oh my god, I literally forgot, oh, strikers, and she one day loses her partner, and soon after, someone else who is kind of working for the Federation comes into the striker ranks, and they kind of strike up a bond, and there's all this stuff. It's very kind of like political intrigue, and it's just really, really great. It's a great fantasy. It's so addicting, and it's so metaphorical and meaningful. I loved it. The next author and like specific series that I have to recommend is Sabaa Tahir, and specifically the Ember and the Ashes series. This is one of my favorite fantasy series. It's one of the most consistent fantasy series, to the point where I rated every single book 5 stars. I love all of them, even if I don't like love all of them equally. Like, I definitely have a favorite and least favorite. I think that they're still great. They're still some of the best fantasy books that I've read, and I just love this series so much. It follows 2 main characters, like in the first book at least, Laia and Elias. Laia is a scholar who lives in like the scholar region in this world, and her brother ends up going missing, and she tries to enlist the help of these people, and they'll only help her if she goes to Blackcliff Academy and works for the commandant there, who happens to be the mother of Elias, who is training to he's training within Blackcliff Academy, and he ends up in this competition to determine who will be the next emperor. So, it's great fantasy. There's a lot of political intrigue, as I feel like I've said 3 times in this video. And yeah, the characters are amazing, the writing is great. It's 4 books, and they're all amazing, so you will not be disappointed. The next author that I want to recommend is Roshni Chokshi. I've read all of her books, and they're all pretty great. But specifically, I have 2 series that I want to talk about, one of them being The Gilded Wolves. I'm sure many of you know that this is one of my favorite series of all time. It is a heist story. It follows all these different characters. I don't really want to get into it because it's very difficult to explain, but it's a great heist. It takes place in like the late 1800s in Paris. The second book takes place in St. Petersburg. The third book takes place in Venice, and it's like there's all these clues and like diagrams in the story, like that, and can you even see that? Yeah. And it's just really fun, and I'm addicted to it, and I read it like every single year. It's just so magical and lush, and I love all the heists. It's so addicting. It's really, really fast-paced, and I loved it. She also has the Pandava series, which is a middle grade series that follows a girl named Arusha, who is like this big liar, and then she ends up getting caught for this lie, and then she's introduced into like all these Hindu mythology things, and gets embroiled in like the other world of Hindu mythology. It's really great. It's a middle grade series. All 5 books are out now. I've read the first 4. I'm gonna read the 5th book very, very soon, but they're really, really solid. I'm a huge fan. Definitely pick it up. The next author that I want to talk about is Rene Atheia. She has 3 series out right now. I read all of them, and they're all really, really great. The first one is The Wrath of the Dawn, which is a retelling of 1001 Nights. I've talked about it a lot of times on my channel, but the first book I liked, but the second book I loved. It's like one of my favorite books of the year. I'm obsessed with this series. It's really, really great, and the writing is phenomenal. Then I also have Flame in the Mist, which is a feudal Japanese-inspired fantasy novel that follows a girl named Mariko, who ends up infiltrating this clan called the Black Clan, and she tries to figure out why they attempted to murder her. Really light stuff, I know. This series is also really lush, and I love all the Japanese kind of mythology and the lore and the atmosphere. It's great. Really, really recommend. And then probably my favorite one of hers is the Beautiful series, which takes place in New Orleans in 1872, and this first book follows a girl named Celine who has fled from Paris after escaping, an attempted assault, and she ends up coming to New Orleans, and she is embroiled in the dark underworld that is there with all these vampires and werewolves and fairies and all that sort of stuff, and each book kind of has a new main character. There are 3 books out right now. There's going to be a 4th one. I've read all 3. They're great. The Beautiful, the first book, is definitely my favorite, but it's a really, really solid series overall. The next book that I want to recommend is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. I read this book last December, and it took me by complete surprise. I was not expecting to enjoy it, because I heard that it was really gory and, gross, and I was just not a fan. But it is a Romeo and Juliet retelling that is set in Shanghai in the 1920s, and it follows 2 main characters, Juliet and Roma. Juliet is a part of the Scarlet Gang, which is an underground kind of, it's part of the seedy underbelly of Shanghai, and Roma is a part of the White Flowers, which is a Russian mob gang, and it just follows them. It's, Romeo and Juliet, and it was really great. It was pretty gory, but it was still, I still really, really loved the writing and the setting and the characters, and I just found them all really, really endearing. So, yeah, definitely a great book, and I would definitely recommend it. I've not read the second book yet. I'm probably going to read it this month for the Asian Readathon, actually, but it was a very solid first book, and I'm very excited to read the sequel and finale. The next author that I want to recommend is S.J. Sindhu. I read 2 of her books, but I do definitely have one that I want to recommend specifically, and that is Marriage of a Thousand Lies. This book follows a girl named Lucky, or a woman named Lucky, who is gay, and she's in a marriage with a man who is also gay. And they, got into this marriage because they have very traditional Sri Lankan parents who wanted them to, be in like an arranged marriage, and so they did so even though they're both gay and they're kind of in this relationship. But the book is not really about that relationship. It's really about Lucky coming home after her grandma suffered like a bad fall, and while her grandma's kind of recovering and stuff, she is at home and she like kind of gets back in touch with someone she knew from high school, this woman that she knew from high school, and it's just a really like sweet story. It has great writing. It's a great audiobook. I listened to the audiobook and I don't really like audiobooks, so it was great. And yeah, the characters are just really, really well rounded, and the main character, Lucky especially, is just so real and vivid, and I really loved her. Then I have another book that I actually read for the Asian Readathon. I actually read those two S.J. Sanu books last Asian Readathon, and also I read Exit West by Mohsin Hamid. This is kind of like a magical realism type of story that follows two main characters who end up going through these doors into these magical worlds, and the writing in this book was just really, really amazing. I don't really read literary books, but this one definitely opened my eyes, and this and the other two S.J. Sanu books kind of opened my eyes into literary and magical realism, and I really, really loved this one. I don't want to say too much because I went in knowing only that, but yeah, the two main characters are really real, and there are still some scenes that I think about in this book, like from time to time, so it definitely sticks with you, and it's so metaphorical, and it'll really make you think. Then the last book that I want to talk about is The Prince and the Dressmaker. This is a graphic novel by Jen Wang, and it follows this prince who is like kind of gender fluid, and he ends up hiring this dressmaker to make dresses for him, and things kind of go from there. It's a graphic novel. I don't want to say too much because like there's not that much of a story, but it was really sweet and it's quick to read if you want something to read this month. I know I said that was last, but I have two books that are not by Asian authors but do feature Asian characters or locations, so I'm going to talk about those very quickly. One of them is The Passenger Duology by Alexandra Bracken. I know this is the second book, Wayfarer, but Passenger, the first book, is downstairs because I reread it this month, but I love this series. It's a time travel series that follows two main characters, Etta and Nicholas. Etta is a modern day New York woman, girl, whatever, and she ends up finding out that her family is able to time travel because she ends up falling into a portal that takes her to a ship in 1776 on the Atlantic, where Nicholas, he's not captain, but he's like one of the people on the ship. He ends up kind of introducing her to time travel, and she has to find this object called the astrolabe, which will change time travel forever. And they go to all these different places. In the first book, they go to, obviously, 1776 Atlantic, they go to 1776 New York, they go to London and Paris and Cambodia and Syria, and in this book, there's a lot of locations: San Francisco, Texas, Carthage, Russia, I can't even, like, think of the other ones. The Vatican City, there are so many other places. Oh, like Rio de Janeiro and Mount Karama and, not Iceland. Is it Iceland? I can't remember. But, yeah, it's just a really, really great series, super solid. Love the writing, love the characters, and it's just really great. So, definitely recommend that one. And the other series that I want to talk about very quickly is Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare, or the Last Hour series. I know it's kind of impractical to talk about this book because you have to read like the other 5 million Shadowhunter books that come before it, but this follows a girl named Cordelia Carstairs who is Persian, so that's why I'm recommending it. And yeah, it's like, I can't really say anything about it because spoilers, but if you haven't read this book, and you can because you've read the other books in the series, definitely recommend this one. But that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have some new books on your TBR. If you've read any of these other books that I talked about, I would love to know your thoughts. But yeah, that is it for this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed. All my social media links are in the description box below, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!